Hey, and welcome to 20 Minutes Self Development with me, your host, Tam Dillon. This podcast is all about focused, effective self development, specifically for healing practitioners, space holders, and intuitives who want to do the work behind the work. In each episode, I'll introduce you to a key concept, reflection, or tool that's designed to strengthen your inner capacity and support the integrity of your practice. In just 20 minutes, we'll go beyond surface level growth and into the real work that makes you a stronger, steadier, and more embodied practitioner. Let's get into today's episode. The self development podcast for holistic practitioners. So today, I want to talk about something that pulls quite a lot of practitioners off balance, myself being one included, and that is the tendency to care too much. Now, that probably sounds a bit odd. That probably sounds pretty counterintuitive. After all, isn't caring parts of what makes us good at what we do? Yes, but there's a difference between caring and carrying. When caring turns into carrying, it's when we are taking on too much emotional or energetic responsibility for a client. And this is where things stop being helpful. It can lead us into patterns like codependence and enabling. And it can very much undermine both our well-being as a practitioner and the client's growth and their well-being. So codependence isn't just something that happens in family systems or romantic relationships. It can absolutely 1000% show up in professional practitioner-client relationships as well. They happen way more regularly than we would think. In simple terms, it's when your sense of worth or purpose starts to get tied to how much someone else needs you. Okay, does that make sense? Codependence. When your sense of worth or your purpose, your reason for being, is tied to how much somebody else needs you. So taking your worth and your purpose and externalizing it completely. It now rests in the hands of the world around you. Okay, sounds very disempowering, right? Well, it is. Okay. I've been aware of codependence for, many years now. Due to personal experience with my brother, I've mentioned my brother in a number of different episodes. He was my first spiritual mentor. He also had a drug addiction problem, and when you grow up around addiction, codependence is it just creeps in kind of naturally. So it was something I'd learned about early on. It was something I'd worked through fairly early on. And coming into doing a work of service, I understood the ramifications of codependency within that space. So I knew the importance of having to work on my codependency. And I'd already done an immense amount of work, which meant that, spotting it in sessions for myself or seeing it in my clients, and navigating through it became so much easier. But for many practitioners, this awareness only comes when the signs are already there. The mismanaged sessions are already there, the unhealthy boundaries or lack thereof are already there. It's the client who can't make a decision without checking with you, or the one who books session after session, not to explore new ground, but to just feel momentarily fixed before returning with the same issue a couple of weeks later. And understand the codependence goes both ways. So it's your need to be needed, and your clients need to have, be needed somewhere. So the codependent relationship, it takes two people, hey? Okay, so codependence is going to be coming from both sides. Enabling is very much the second cousin of codependence. It's when, often out of care and compassion, enabling very often comes from a space of care and compassion. And we, instead of maintaining professionalism and boundaries, we step in to remove a client's discomfort too quickly. We offer solutions or reassurance or interventions that actually prevents them from doing their own work. The intention is good. Like I said, we're coming from care and compassion. We're coming from good intention, but the impact is disempowering, where we're like, oh no, it's okay. So your client's kind of digging around in the root cause of whatever is ailing them, and they're unpacking stuff, and you're like, oh, it's okay, and you're trying to ease and soothe through the process, and your client's just unpacking slower and slower, and eventually they just stop unpacking it all. So stop fiddling with your client's process. Right? Like this is where active listening becomes a really helpful skill, because it is very disempowering for your clients, where you're offering the solutions, or trying to make them feel better about what's happening, or offer the reassurance, or intervene before it gets too uncomfortable for them. Let them go through their process of discomfort. They're supposed to. You're just there to hold the space safely for them. So we get into practitioner work because we want to help, because we care. We're naturally nurturing, we're naturally caregiving, and seeing someone in distress can trigger an urge to rescue, to fix, to make it better right now. That is, I think, for the most part, just human nature. Think of a baby crying. Your natural response is to pick it up and cuddle it and say everything's going to be okay. And we want to do the same for our clients. Okay, they come to us in distress, and some of them with the most horrific experiences and traumas, and we're just like, oh, I want to take all the pain away from you. And while that's well-meaning and good intentioned, it's again disempowering. Sometimes it's about our own discomfort as well. Sometimes it's not about easing our client's discomfort. Sometimes it's just to ease our own discomfort, because what the client is sharing with us is making us very uncomfortable, because perhaps our empathy is being triggered and we're putting ourselves a little too far into their shoes, or maybe it's something that hits a little bit too close to home, on something that you haven't worked through for yourself. So you're trying to now ease your own discomfort by, easing and consoling your clients. So you're kind of, now we're projecting into our session, because we don't like sitting in the space of uncertainty, and we certainly don't like to watch someone struggle. That's not in our nature, especially as practitioners. Like our nature is to nurture and care. So you see something in distress, we want to help it, right? If we've ever been in relationships where our value was tied to how much we did for others, those patterns can sneak into our professional work. And without the language to name what's happening, codependence, enabling, we might not even realize that the help we're offering is actually keeping the clients dependent on us. Your clients is going to be with you for the next 100 years, because they're not going to fully work through their stuff, because they are now dependent and reliant on you. Because codependence, enabling, nice unhealthy dynamic is now forming in your sessions. This is where the practice of non-attachment becomes really handy. I naturally cultivated the practice of non-attachment before I even did my yoga teacher training. I'm going to be teaching non-attachment in this episode more from the yogic perspective of aparigraha. So before I even had that word, knew what that word meant, after a number of years of experience and doing my own work with my codependency and understanding enabling, I knew that I needed to detach to a certain degree within sessions, during session and after session, particularly after session, because I noted that I would have a particularly intense or really heavy or hard session with a client, and I would sit with that session for the rest of the day. I would mull that session over. I would mull my client's issues over. I would think of other scenarios and solutions. What else could I have said? Did I help them? Where's the space for the rest of my clients? Where's space for me? Okay, so we can see how this dynamic is not beneficial. Okay, so the practice of non-attachment is something that I naturally knew I needed to cultivate for myself somehow. Back then I used the word disassociate, where now understanding what the word disassociation means, I know it's not the right word to use, but for your lack of terminology, go listen 2 episodes back to my episode around language. Like, language is important. So I would use the word disassociate when I would explain, where people would be like, oh, aren't you carrying all that stuff from your clients? And I'd be like, no, I disassociate after a session. They go their separate way and I go mine. It doesn't mean I don't care about my client and that I'm not for them in the session. But when the session is done, the session is done. I don't need to keep wandering around with my client stuff. The difference between caring and carrying. All right, I'm not carrying my client's stuff. I am still caring for them though. So the practice of non-attachment is a far better word to use than disassociate, because disassociate is a different term altogether. And like I said, it doesn't mean that you don't care. It means that you care deeply, but you don't attach your sense of worth, your sense of success, your identity to the outcome of your client's process. And you don't attach yourself to your client's stuff. So the session with your client comes to a close. You're not still 2 hours later thinking about your client's experience or their situation, or what more could you do for them, or maybe when they come to the next session you could talk to them about that, because what about your next client? I did a critical mass recording a couple weeks back, and the person that we were chatting to said something really helpful, and she shared with us that every client should be your first client. And man, I love that. Like, hell yes, every client should be your first client, but every client can't be your first client if you're carrying your previous client stuff. Okay, so fresh, clean slate, done, detached, doesn't mean you don't care. It means that you care enough about your next client to not still be attached and connected to your other client, because your other client's now going to bleed into this client's session. You're not going to be there 100% for that next client because you're still connected to that client. And what if you connected that client, the next client, and maybe even the client after that? Now you got all these connection tentacles out there, and oh my god, you must be exhausted. You must be so close to burnout. That's unbelievable. Okay, does it all make sense? Yes. Yogic philosophy, non-attachment. We have 2 words that we can look at. We can look at the practice of aparigraha or the practice of vairagya. They both look at forms of non-attachment, but for today I'm going to be looking at vairagya specifically, and it's about releasing clinging and letting go of the need to control outcomes. So vairagya is about the releasing the need for control. You're trying to control the outcome. You're trying to control the outcome of your client's process. You're trying to control the outcome of the comfort level of the session. You're trying to control the direction that your client heads in. Detach, let go, non-attachment. Okay, like they practice the skill. It means that you're showing up fully for your client in session, offering your best skills, coming in full, confident, competent, holding the space, and then letting the process be theirs. You don't carry what isn't yours. Okay, that is the core premise of the practice of non-attachment, is carrying only what is yours to carry and allowing the rest to go. And practicing non-attachment allows you to stay compassionate without taking on responsibility for your client's healing or for their process. It holds a really beautiful, clear boundary between your energy and your client's energy. It allows you to trust your clients enough to let them sit in discomfort, whether when that's part of their growth. Sitting in discomfort is something that they need to do, and you're allowing them that because you're trusting the process and you're detaching from the process enough to allow that to happen naturally and safely. And one of the simplest ways to begin the practice of non-attachment is to check in with yourself during a session and after a session. Ask, are you leaving the space carrying anything that isn't yours? Are you still thinking about your client? Are you still obsessing on your client and their process? And if the answer is yes, take a few minutes to consciously release it. Build a mantra for yourself if you need to. Find maybe a breath technique. Breathing in the next session, breathing out the last session. Something simple and tangible that you can give to yourself that creates that disconnection between you and the client that you've just seen, because you don't need to maintain that connection with them any longer. The session is closed. So think of each session as a circle. Client arrives, starts with the circle, you run through the session, you run through the circle, you get to the end of the session, the circle is closed. The connection is closed. You leave the circle there where it is. You'll pick the circle up when the client comes back. You move on to the next client and their circle. And so you start that process new and fresh with the next client. So leave the space and check in with yourself. Am I closing the session or fully, or have I still got the session open in certain ways? And if so, have a practice in place that's going to allow you to disconnect from it and detach from it. You can also practice noticing in the moment, like I say, during session, when you're tempted to step in and fix something, or you see your client becoming distressed or very uncomfortable or very unhappy or very angry or whatever, and you instead of filling the space or trying to manage the space or make the space comfortable, you allow the space to just be what it is, horribly uncomfortable, because that is what your client needs. The discomfort is nothing to do with you. You're not the most important person in the room. I've said this in previous episodes. Your client is the most important person in the room. So let their stuff fill the space. Let the clients sit with their own thoughts. Let them sit with their feelings, because they're in a safe enough space to do so. And that pause can be so much more powerful and impactful than you being like, oh, why don't you try this? Or here's some advice for you. Or, oh, that sounds really hard. Here, have some tissues. Okay. Sometimes you need to just shush. Shush and let your client process. All right. You don't need to control the situation. And when you feel that pull to do too much and to overcare and to manage the situation and take away the discomfort and take away the pain, remind yourself your role is to support the client's capacity to navigate their own life, not to live it for them. Okay, you got your own life to live. Like you will be exhausted and burnt out by tomorrow if you try to live the life of every single client that walks through your door. If you have 2 clients, if you have 1 client, you will be exhausted. So remind yourself your role is to support the client's capacity to navigate their own life, not to live it for them. Okay. Codependence, enabling, overcaring, overdoing, overfunctioning, these aren't signs that you are a crappy practitioner. It doesn't mean that you stink at your job, okay? They're signs that you're human. They're signs that you care, that you are a loving, caring, kind, compassionate person, okay? This is what it shows. But the more that you understand these patterns and the adverse effect of these things, like as much as you're coming from well-meaning spaces, the negative impact of these things has, like, it far outweighs your good intentions, but the more that you're noticing these things and the less that you're being like, oh my god, I'm so dependent with my clients, be gentle with yourself in the process, because that way, the more you can consciously work with these patterns and deconstruct them and ensure that you're coming into session not being enabling or culting a space for codependence. So coming into your sessions, pay attention to your responses, your reactions, what it is that where your brain is going, where your emotions going. Are you stepping into these spaces of doing too much and caring too much, and stepping into codependence and enabling. And by paying attention, you can start to notice the patterns, and when you have awareness of the patterns, you know what the patterns are that you want to break. And as always, you know that I'm here to help you through that pattern breaking if need be. That's part of the work that I do as a mentor for practitioners, is help you with those cycles that we do unintentionally get stuck in as practitioners. I've been there, I've done it. Okay, we're human beings at the end of the day. So know that my mentoring is available to you if this is something that you're struggling with and something that you're trying to work on in your sessions. So cultivate the practice of non-attachment. And if you want help cultivating that practice, hello, I'm a yoga teacher. Come knock on my door. It's part of the mentoring that I do. So, but for real, try the practice of non-attachment. It really was one of the more helpful practices for me in breaking the cycles of codependence and enabling. Their stuff, not mine. Their path, not mine. I'm just here to hold the space so that they can do the process for themselves. Because it's non-attachment truly is one of the most loving things that you can actually practice as a space holder, because it honors your client's process, it protects your own energy, and it keeps your work clean and clear. It's not about detachment or disinterest or, well, I don't care enough about my clients. It's about trust, clarity, and respect for the boundaries of where you end and your client begins. Okay. And like I say, if you want to explore these themes more deeply, by all means, reach out. Let's get into some mentoring sessions, because I know that these are things that can really hinder you as a practitioner, and it can really hinder you in your sessions with your clients as well. Because at the end of the day, caring for your clients also means caring enough not to carry what isn't yours. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of 20 Minutes Self-Development. If today's reflections were helpful, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode, where we'll explore another tool or principle to support you in doing your own work as a healing practitioner. If you're looking for deeper support, my practitioner mentoring sessions are designed to help you refine your presence, integrate your self-work, and build a practice that's both ethical and sustainable. You can also visit the Tam Dillon Academy to explore all current programs and resources built specifically for space holders like you. Until next time, keep showing up for your own work, and remember, real growth is built on consistency, integrity, and self-responsibility.